Yate, welcome to the Dragon's Den. I'm the young old man, and today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite bands, Metallica. So, I got into Metallica later than most people, but probably around the same time as a lot of their current fans, only because, you know, I was too young. Well, not that I was too young, it was like I was really young when they first released their first album, which was 83, Kill 'Em All. I was like 7. And I wasn't in the environment that would expose me to them. I was growing up in the South Bronx. Hip hop was the king for me. And though the 80s, especially in New York being one of the a huge market and one of the biggest markets for music, 80s was a great era for music. And if you're a kid in my age range, late 60s, early to mid 70s kid, like music went through an explosion. Late 70s going through the 80s because there were all types of music that were popular. Rock was popular, pop was popular, disco was waning, but it was still popular. Country was popular. You had soft rock and soft pop and then that was also the era where the music video was becoming one of the main avenues of music going out, and easy listening and all this stuff. So like R&B music, R&B and soul and then hip hop was also growing as a culture of music and entering the arena of popular music. And New York was, of course, the genesis of that because New York is where hip hop was born. So, South Bronx all day. Sup? BX, baby. Anyway, so growing up in that era, I wasn't exposed to a lot of rock. Like, Billy Idol was really big back then. His music played, and then, Boy George and the Culture Club, they're not rock, but Cyndi Lauper, Madonna, and of course Michael Jackson was the biggest thing in the world. And Mike is pop, and he's rock, and he's everything, right? So you know, Prince, Purple Rain, he's rock, he's a guitarist. Like, come on, he's a guitar guy. Anyway, so it's like huge music, right? Huge music era. So I was exposed to everything in my father's house. He's like old school, soul, R&B stuff, and a lot of world music, African drums, and some jazz. So like I was exposed to a lot of music growing up. But growing up in the South Bronx, where I was growing up, wasn't really privy to a lot of hard rock music and heavy metal. So I got exposed to that when I went down to visit my mom during holidays and stuff in Virginia Beach. She had a house, she had cable, and MTV. That was also the era of the burgeoning of MTV. And I was exposed to MTV down south. And they were big on rock music and a lot of pop and soft rock and all that, mostly white musicians. They were kind of racist in the beginning. So, it really kind of stayed that way, to be perfectly honest. I mean, Michael Jackson got in, and then a couple of other artists. But if you weren't rock affiliated, meaning you were pop, they didn't have you on until, hip hop and rap music couldn't be denied, and they had MTV Yo Raps, and then rap music got on. But like they didn't play black artists. They didn't play soul and R&B on MTV. So anyway. So, but Metallica had been going since '83, right? The first album came out, Kill 'Em All. They've been chugging along for years. I like I think a huge chunk of their fan base didn't really become admirers of their music and fans of their music until their fifth album, right? I believe it's fifth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The self-titled Metallica album, which everybody calls the Black Album because of the blacked out cover with the snake on it in black. So that's when I first became aware of them, but I still wasn't like a huge fan yet. Like the main like singles from that album, I remember like um, Until It Sleeps, Enter Sandman, and of course Nothing Else Matters. My favorite song on this album is Through the Never. But I like every track on this album. But I wasn't like a diehard admirer when this album first dropped. This is, the self-titled Metallica album, the Black Album. I liked them, but I wasn't like a huge fan. I wasn't. This came out in '91, and it was like I knew of them. I had a copy of it on tape that a friend had given me. So I listened to the music, and I really liked the songs. I really liked the songs, but I didn't really know about the band. It wasn't until I went home for the Christmas '93 Christmas, and Metallica had put out this live box set. Right, it had an audio live album, and then videos of two concerts. Right, and it was a box set, and it came. You got the box set either in VHS or DVD. I didn't have a DVD player at the time, so I bought the VHS. Later, many years later, I bought the DVD. I rebought the entire box set just so I could get the DVDs. I liked it that much. But at the time, for the marketing campaign for Live Shit Binge and Purge, they were using songs from the concert footage as videos on MTV. And that's when I saw Whiplash and Blackened. Right? Yeah. No, Battery. Excuse me. Whiplash and Battery. And I was just like, oh. See, their early music was way faster than anything on the Black Album. The energy was much different. And so it was like, and that's not to say that there wasn't anything hard or really, nice about. But again, when I start talking more about the band, what I like about them is their growth. They grow. And they go back and, revisit those things, but they progress. Each album, for the most part, they've always progressed, and I like that. That's why I like them so much. I'm a fan of real musicianship, and these guys are real musicians. So, but it was the high energy of Whiplash and Battery that I was like, oh, I need to learn who these guys are, and I need more of the music. So I bought the box set. This is actually the first Metallica product album that I bought was the box set, right? Then I bought this. And then the summer of '94, I went on a tear to get all of their previous albums. And there was a big store down in Virginia Beach, because that's where I was for the summer. I'm visiting my mom again for the summer. I graduated high school. I was working, so I had a little job, so I was working, making my own little money, and I spent all my money on books and music and movies. Most of my adulthood, that's what I spent most of my money on. Anyway, so one place I went to was that summer. I spent almost all of my time at a place called Planet Music, which was a huge music store. And one thing I loved about Planet Music that was really innovative at the time was they had listening kiosks in the store. They had this huge desk set up, and each desk sectioned off where they had CD players, and you could listen to music. You could just pick a disc, say I want to listen to this. They open it up and let you listen to it. And I bought a lot of music that year. A lot of Black Crowes, a lot of Queen, a lot of Metallica. So I bought Master of Puppets first, because I heard a lot about that one after I started reading more. And you got to understand, this is '94. This is before the internet was a real thing like it is today. You had to go to the store. You had to read magazines. And I was huge with magazines. Again, like books, magazines, anything I could read. So I read a lot of music magazine stuff, and I started reading about them. So, and then when I went to the store with Planet Music, I listened to all of them except Ride the Lightning. For some reason, I had to Ride the Lightning was the last one I bought. Bought Kill 'Em All first. Jesus. I bought Master of Puppets first. Then I bought And Justice for All. Then I bought Kill 'Em All. And much later, I finally found a copy of Ride the Lightning. This one was hard to find. I don't think it was one of their more popular albums, and so maybe it didn't go into like I don't know. I just know this one was the last one I got of their back catalog before the Black Album, because I just could not find a copy of it, and when I did, I was so happy. So that's my beginning of getting into Metallica, was the actual live box set, album and concert box set that they released, and being introduced to their earlier music from before the Black Album, and just falling in love with their musician. And one of the reasons why I fell in love with was because of their musicianship. They sounded live like they sounded on their records, which was huge for me. If that, I mean, you're a real musician. And then there's in one of the concerts, I don't know if it was the And Justice for All concert or the Black Album concert. It was one of the two. The actual video concerts. There's a I think it was the And Justice for All, and there's a that's the thing I like about Metallica's earlier albums before the Black Album too, was they always had an instrumental track, no lyrics, just music, awesome stuff. And then on this one, on And Justice for All, there's a track called To Live Is To Die. It's almost 10 minutes of music, right? But like somewhere in the middle, there's this really mellow, almost melancholy guitar duet between James and Kirk, and it's just beautiful, right? And my jaw hit the floor the first time I heard it. I was like, "That's." I didn't know that was on one of the albums. I was like, these rock guys can really play. That was when I first watched it, and so when I was listening to And Just for All, and then I was listening to this long ass, and then they got to that part. I was like, oh, they really put that out on the album. I was hooked. I love musicianship. So anyway, so that was the beginning of my journey, and so ever since then, I've gotten every album as it came out. So like, Black Album was 91, Live Shit Binge and Purge was 93, and then but as far as studio albums, the last studio album was the Black Album, that was 91. The next one was 96, which was Load. Got it when it came out. And then Reload came out 97. It was supposed to be a double album from, what you hear. They were going to release a double album, and I forget why they didn't do it that way, but, so like musically, there's a growth in every Metallica album. Kill 'Em All is the first one, and then there's growth to Ride the Lightning. Then there's growth to Master of Puppets, and this was the one that really started getting them a lot of buzz, and the wider music community, because like the first two, they were still like underground metal acts, and then Master of Puppets, people started paying attention, and then And Just for All, people really started paying attention, right? And then where'd it go? I just had the Black Album. I just showed it to you guys, right? Where'd it go? Oh, I buried it. My bad. So, And Just for All, and then a huge shift in direction of what, like a lot of these, they were still on their speed, thrash metal, and then this was more just, it's still heavy metal, but not as much thrashy speed, and but still phenomenal work. And this was at the time, this was commercially success. Like, this was huge. This turned them into the biggest band in music next to Guns N' Roses. Because Guns N' Roses at the time was the biggest band, but Metallica was right up there with them. And they, being the two biggest, they actually went on tour together. Really? You just gonna get my video like that? I'm talking here. Huge growth between And Justice for All and Metallica album, the Black album, and then a huge shift because between '91 and '96, the last next studio album was Load. Load was a huge change, right? And all of those albums up until the Black album, these guys were hardcore, heavy metal, thrash metal, long-haired headbangers, right? And they were still hard rocking headbangers, except they cut their hair. I remember there was a huge, there was a huge like a lot of their old fans just gave them so much shit for cutting their hair, and it's just like, dude, we've been doing this for like over 10 years now. We're gonna grow outside of music, and it's going to reflect on our music. It's like, and what I like about them is they care about their fans a great deal. They care about the people who they know that I like that they say the fifth the fans are the fifth member of Metallica, right? Which is it's such a cool way of them looking at it, because yeah, without people loving the music and purchasing it, you would not have the freedom to make music for a living and tour, and so it is a give and take, and I like that they view it that way. But ultimately, when it comes to the creativeness, they keep their own counsel. You like them because of what they create. Either you're gonna like what they create or you're not, but they're not gonna conform to you. I love that about them as artists. It reminds me of, and the hip hop equivalent would be like Mos Def and KRS-One. They're gonna do what they do, and either you're gonna love it or you don't. But fuck you, I'm gonna make what I make. But anyway, so studio albums, Load, Reload. Reload was '97, and then famously, Saint Anger. This album right here. Lot of controversy over this, even bigger than Load when they changed their look, and that's because way back during And Justice for All days, which came out in '88, I think during the tour, well, it was before And Justice for All, during the Master of Puppets tour. It was the Master of Puppets tour. Cliff Burton died. I didn't go over the actual names of the members of the band, which I should have done. But Metallica is, well, it started out as James Hetfield, Lars Ulrich, Cliff Burton, and originally, before this dropped, Dave Mustaine, right? But Dave got kicked out before the album dropped, and Kirk Hammett became the guitarist. So James Hetfield is rhythm guitarist, lead singer, and rhythm guitar and vocals. Lars Ulrich is drums. Cliff Burton was bass. Kirk Hammett was lead guitar. During Master of Puppets, I think that while they were on tour for Master of Puppets, there was a bus accident while they were with their tour bus, and Cliff died. And the guys took very little time off to mourn the death of Cliff. And Cliff was very instrumental in, pun intended, the sound and the direction of Metallica, right? He and Kirk were the only officially, I believe, trained musicians. Like James, he found his way. Like today, James and Lars are great, but Lars is still not the best drummer in the world. He's not, but he is awesome. And James can play guitar. He started out on drums, and then for the band he went to rhythm guitar, and he's good. He's great now, But in the beginning, he's learning still, really. So, and like Kirk Hammett was a trained guitarist. He took lessons. Kirk famously took lessons from Joe Satriani. If you don't know who Joe Satriani is, he's a guitar god. He's one of the best to ever touch the six strings. So, there's that. So Kirk and Cliff both came in with, and Cliff was, he loved doing like, hard rock and thrash metal, but he was classically trained. He loved classical music. He brought that level of musicality to the band and get them to appreciate, like composers from old and the music that they created. So that was really cool. He brought that to the band. So he was very integral to the sound of Metallica. So when he died, that was a huge loss. To this day, to this day still, every time they perform whatever, they have some kind of tribute to Cliff. Rightfully so. But, they were really tight in their group when they were kids. They were kids when they started, let's be clear. They're like 15, 16, 17-year-olds. 83. So when Cliff died, because they were in the middle of a tour and they didn't want to disappoint their fans, they took a little bit of time off. But while they were taking time off to mourn and grieve, they were really finding a bassist. They were finding a person to fill in for bass for Cliff, and that was Jason Newsted. And they hired Jason not just as a fill-in for the rest of the tour, but as a member of Metallica. And that was like 87 or so, because and Justice for All came out 88, and Master of Puppets was out when 86. So like I think 87 is when Cliff passed, and then Jason joined, and then he was part of a group called Flotsam and Jetsam, which was like indie underground band. He was a fan of the band, so he was super stoked that they chose him, and he was with the band for 15 years. Went from like 87, 88 to 2003, that's why I brought this up, because Cliff loomed so large in the group and amongst the band members, particularly James, Lars, and Kirk. When Jason came on, they were also young, and James and Lars and Kirk were still grieving the loss of their friend, and they were young. So they hazed the shit out of Jason for years. I don't really think Lars and James ever stopped. I think Kirk kind of backed off from it after a couple of years, but like for a long, long time, James and Lars hazed Jason simply because he wasn't Cliff, and I know this because I've been following the band. Like at this point, I've been following the band when stuff will come out in interviews and magazines and stuff. And then when the internet age, really, kicked over, I would follow what was going on. And so, 2003, Saint Anger drops. Right, there's a whole lot of drama going on during the making of this album. Jason famously leaves the band, and everybody's like, what the hell? Who does that? Right? And a lot of it had to do with, James and Lars famously have huge anger issues and control issues. Right now it's famous, but even back then you could kind of hear it. I study psychology. I study people. I could see it in the things that they would be said in interviews and stuff, in magazines and in online videos and stuff. But anyway, so during the making of this, Saint Anger, Jason leaves. They get a new bass or whatever. And during the making of this, they were doing a documentary of the making of this album, because it had been quite a number of years. This was 2003. That dropped, and the last studio album had dropped in 2007, so it's like 6 years. So maybe they started working on it maybe a year or two before. So 4 to 5 years they've been, after Reload, they start working on a new studio album, new music. And famously what happened, one of the big arguments was, when they weren't on tour together as a band, they would each flex their musical muscles helping out, other bands, local bands that they liked, or other bands that were touring bands that didn't have the notoriety that they did in the film. Because, like, they're the biggest band, and at this point, they're the biggest rock band on the planet. And so any cosign from any one of them is going to up the cachet of anybody they're working with. Now, Jason had been working with a band. I didn't do the research on who it was. I don't remember at the time. But, Jason was working with some other band, and he got credit on their release. They released some music, they released a CD or whatever, they released the album, and Jason was credited on it. Well, James famously got fucking upset about that, and Jason's like, "What are you upset about? I'm not leaving him in." But like, he's like, "You do the same thing. You've worked with this, and James's argument was, "I never took, credit for it. My name is not on anybody's credits outside of Metallica." And so James's point was, it's a question of divided loyalty. Jason's like, my loyalty is always with Metallica first. It always has been for the last, for the last 15, like 12, 13, 15 years. Like, the call comes, we're getting together, I'm always there. I've never given you a reason to question my loyalty. And James, being the control freak that he was just like, you can't do that and whatever. And then, Jason was trying to weather that, and then, James had, he has addiction problems. He's got an addict. He's an addict, so he has addiction problems. And then Lars has his own issues. Kirk is relatively the laid back one of the group, always has been. But so while they were making this film, Lars and James decide they need to have therapy, but they didn't want to do it on their own. They wanted to do it as a group. They wanted Metallica to go to this famous, group therapist guy who's done group therapy for other famous people, whatever. And Jason was like, no. Y'all two need therapy. And I'm proud of y'all for recognizing that and doing it, but the whole group don't need therapy. Y'all do it. I'm not doing it. And James famously gave him an ultimatum, and Jason, I respect Jason, always have ever since then, because it's like, I don't do ultimatums, son. Don't test me. And that's Jason, and everybody's like, oh, how could Jason do that? How can, like, Jason got a lot of shit for a lot of years. Like, how you gonna leave the biggest band in the world for my fucking own mental health because I'm a man? Like, what are you talking about? He loved Metallica. He gave 15 years of his life to that band. Like, what are you talking about? But what you're not gonna do is try to treat me like I'm your child and tell me what I have to do and should not do. That has nothing to do with the band. You don't control my life. You control the band. You have a controlling stake in the band, but you don't control my life outside of the band. And what you're not going to do is tell me that I need to do this as if it's a band thing, and it's really not. So he left. I respect him for that. Always have. And so since they were doing the documentary, making of this film, it turned out to be a documentary of James and Lars and Kirk going to therapy while making the album. And Bob Rock became like the unofficial fourth member of Metallica. He filled in for bass for a lot of this because Jason wasn't there. And I forget the therapist's name's not important. He was kind of a dickhead. And, he did help them work through some stuff, but he was doing things he shouldn't have done. So ultimately they stopped going to him, stopped using him. But during the process of the documentary of them making Saint Anger is called Some Kind of Monster, which is actually a title of one of the songs on the album. And in the documentary, they go through the process of finding a new bassist, and everybody and their mother tried out. I think even Les Claypool, who is like one of the most awesome bassists in the world, who has his own band, Primus, even Les Claypool tried out for Metallica. Like, that should tell you the caliber of musicianship that these guys are known for and are famous for within the music community. Like, Les Claypool doesn't need Metallica. He doesn't need to be a bassist. He has his own band. He does his own projects. He's been in the business as long as they have, just about. Like, it's Les Claypool. He's one of the best bassists ever. And he tried out to be the bassist for Metallica. And obviously they didn't choose him because his style of basses. Now, I'm pretty sure he could do Metallica bassing, but that would be such a waste of his talents because he's that what he does is so separate from what Metallica does. He would be, in my opinion, he would have been minimizing himself, and even the boys in the band realized it's like he's great. Like he's less Claypool. Like they know who he is. They're friends. It's like, but like we couldn't put him in the band because like it would be a waste of his talents. Like he's playing our stuff. Like maybe going forward, create, but like they're gonna tour old stuff, and he's gonna have to learn old Metallica songs, which he probably can do easily. But you know, going forward, yeah, it'd have been maybe great for Les to be part of Metallica and their bassist and making new music with them. But him playing the old catalog, it's ridiculous. He didn't need to do it. But anyway, I digress. But they wound up choosing Robert Trujillo, who had been in a bunch of bands, and I think the biggest band that he had been in was Suicidal Tendencies, which was like a underground touring rock band. They'd been around for a while, since the '80s. They had what, and I knew Suicidal Tendencies. I was very happy that I knew who he was, because I wasn't a huge follower of Suicidal Tendencies, but I had one of their albums because they had a song called "You Can't Bring Me Down," which is a great song. A friend of mine, my friend Chris, had introduced me to back in the day, and I was like, that song is so awesome, so I bought the CD. But Robert Trujillo was touring with them for like forever, so he knew them. They all knew each other, and so he made the band. And what they did with Robert that they never did with Jason, which they should have, was they made him a full member of Metallica. So what they did was 4 members. So all Metallica business is each member gets 25%. Even though Robert's coming in, now moving forward, all business that they do is 25% stake for all members. And it's like, that's so great. That's like therapy actually did wonders for James and Lars, because that's what they should have done with Jason. And so, as much as I liked them as a band, as people, it was like I kind of looked sideways at Jason and Lars, because they had huge daddy issues. They had huge anger issues, especially James, and control issues. And they used to butt heads all the time. So, leads for some great creations, obviously, but there's healthier ways to create and still create great music. But I say all that to say that because of all of that drama that surrounded this album, they don't like the album. And for understandable reasons, they created, a lot. But this is one of the best albums they've ever created, in my opinion. It's like my second favorite Metallica album. Because musically, it's just vastly different than anything they had done before. James had let go of some of the reins of control. Like, James famously wrote all of the lyrics for all of his songs previously, right? The other guys contributed musically to a lot of stuff, whatever. But lyric wise, because James was the one singing, he felt like he had to be the one making all the lyrics. And the other guys got to contribute lyrics to a lot of the songs, especially Kirk, and that was cool. It was cool watching. And I remember the video. I haven't watched it in a long time, but I remember the documentary. Kirk, you could see he was really excited and happy that he got to actually contribute to lyrics and it be accepted. I'm pretty sure he tried before, but James famously was like, "No, this is my shit," and he says it in the documentary. He's like, that was something he had to work through. So it's a cool, and like for that reason, because. So there was some innovative for them, new things that they tried that worked really well musically, I think. But because of all of the other drama that particularly James and Lars were working through, that they were purging while they were making the album, they don't like the songs and the sound. They don't perform the songs because, again, mostly for James and Lars, any of those songs is going to take them to the process that they went through to making this, and they just... I understand why they don't want to revisit it. But I hope they get to a point where they look back and really realize how great the songs music wise and lyric wise, this album is. It's one of my favorite fucking albums. I love Saint Anger. But that's just me. And then that was 2003, excuse me. And then 2008. We get Death Magnetic. This is the best album they've ever created. Sonically, musically, lyrically, emotionally, psychologically, magically, energetically. This is the best album they've ever completed. And they did that purposefully and by accident. And I heard, like, I was part of the fan club. By the time, between Saint Anger and Death Magnetic, I was part of the fan club. I was checking the website. I was getting emails and all that stuff. So I was really checking in with them. And they have a newsletter. I forget what it's called. But, and they had actually made like a coffee table book of the newsletter and years of the newsletter up until, like, I forget what point, maybe up until about but like right before this came out, I think. No, it was a few years before this, like maybe around 2005, whatever they released it. And I read that, and it was fascinating to watch, to look at them responding to their fans and the fan letters and stuff. Really interesting book. But so the process that they were going through to making this, they famously said, and it truly shows in the work was, what they did was they took the best of who they were from all of what they've done when they revisited their youthful selves. They revisited them young selves, the music and the fire that they had and the energy that they had, and they merged it with the veterans, the damn near 30-year veterans they had that they were. They merged their youthful selves with their veteran selves, their elder selves, and created something that was just a perfect melding of the young and old selves. And that's what they set out to do, and that's exactly what they did. This holds up to anything they've ever done. No matter what your favorite Metallica, if you're an old time fan, it's like Kill 'Em All is the best, Ride the Lightning is the best, Master Puppets and Justice for All is the best. It's like, the old fans, they go to their old stuff, and then the turning point was the Black Album, and then you got a lot of newer fans, and Black Album is the best. Nobody says Load and Reload is the best, even though they're great albums. But like, and nobody, a lot of people side with the band. They don't like Saint Anger. I love Saint Anger. I'm different. I love music, and that's music. Anyway, but this, they even went back to doing an instrumental. There's an instrumental in here. Fucking awesome. Suicide and Redemption. Awesome. Almost like 10 minutes of just pure musical awesomeness. And, and this is the first album that they did with Robert Trujillo. And of course he did what he does because, he's a veteran musician just like them. So it's the best. Death Magnetic is the best album Metallica's ever done. I went to the concert for Death Magnetic. The first time I got to see them live was for the Death Magnetic tour. And that was a great experience. Those guys are just awesome. The only time I'd seen them live was on VHS from the live shit Binge and Purge. So that I always wanted to see them live ever since then, and I had never gotten around to it. So I was glad back in 2008, 2009, I got to see them live. Awesome, weird experience. I'll talk about that another time. And then after Death Magnetic, in 2000, which came out in 2008, 2016, they released Hardwired to Self-Destruct. Right now, this one, by the time that came out, I had a kid, I had a wife. I wasn't really paying attention to the outside world that much anymore. So I didn't even know Hardwired to Self-Destruct came out. I didn't know that Metallica were going to album. Nothing. I hadn't been paying attention. I think it was holiday time. I think it was like around Christmas or whatever, and went to Barnes and Noble, and they had that Metallica's new releases. It was on discount because it was like, this is like triple, it's like double album, Triple album. It's got 2 discs and a bonus disc with old with a live and cover songs. And this was the first album they released on. They started their own record label, Blackened Music, Blackened Recordings, which they probably would have. They probably should have done that with Death Magnetic, but they were on Elektra for a long time. Death Magnetic was on Warner, and so they started their own label. I need to check and see if they actually have signed any acts under Blackened, because that would be cool. Metallica, becoming elder statesmen and helping younger artists more directly through a record label. But again, like I said, I haven't checked. But I saw Hardwired to Self-Destruct, and a credit to what I know their musicianship to be. I didn't even know the album was out. I hadn't heard a single from it or nothing. I just bought it because I knew it was going to be good, and it is good. It's a really good album. However, it sounds like a continuation of Death Magnetic. It doesn't sound like they had any real growth between Death Magnetic and Hardwired to Self-Destruct. Now, I love the band because one of the reasons why is their dedication to musicianship. Like, they sound live like they do on record, and it's great, and I love that. But from each album to the next, there was growth. Like from Kill 'Em All to Ride the Lightning, there was growth. To Master of Puppets, there was growth. To And Just for All, there was growth. To Metallica album, the Black Album, there was growth and a huge shift in style. And then to Load, again, another shift in style and growth. Load and Reload was supposed to be a double album, so there wasn't a huge amount of growth, but there was still a difference in style. And then, of course, Saint Anger was a huge change for them. And then, but again, growth and a whole lot of levels, which is why this album resonates with me so much, because there was so many different levels, not just musically but outside music, that showed in the music about how much they've grown. And then Death Magnetic, which was a culmination of everything they'd ever done. They revisited their youthful selves and merged it with their veteran selves and just created one of the best bodies of work ever. And so Hardwired to Self-Destruct sounds like they didn't really grow that. They didn't grow that much from this to this. This sounds like a lot of songs that didn't make the cut for Death Magnetic. That's hard. Which they're great songs. Don't get me wrong. And I never went back and looked up and checked out, what the process was for them making Hardwired to Self-Destruct. Again, like I was raising a kid. I was at a family, so I wasn't that heavy into that. And by the time this came out, 2016, I was into filmmaking. I went to film school, and I was working, building myself in the film community in New York. So, like, I really wasn't going back to check. But, all of the studio albums are great. They're just great musicians. I love them. And then they had, and then the Live Shit Benjamin Purge, their box set of live stuff. And then they had Garage Inc., which is their album of cover songs. They're doing covers of other people's songs. And, like, that's just awesome. Me personally, I like their covers better than I like the originals. Because I just do. And then this is one of the most awesome pieces of music ever. It's Metallica with a symphony orchestra. San Francisco Symphony Orchestra, and orchestrations composed and conducted by the great Michael Kamen. Now, Michael Kamen, great composer, has done a lot of films, a lot of other stuff. And he's actually worked with Metallica on some of their studio albums in the past, which is why they were so comfortable working with him to create such an awesome body of work. This is one of my most favorite products of Metallica that's ever put out. Because I love orchestral music, and I love rock music, and Metallica's one of the best rock groups ever, and Michael Kamen is one of the best modern composers ever. he's passed, unfortunately. And so, yeah, and then they did. Michael Kamen composed music for a lot of the songs in their back catalog, and then they had Metallica had two ideas for songs that they had never finished and fleshed out, and so there's two original songs that they worked with Michael Kamen to flesh out into full songs, which is Minus Human and No Leaf Clover, two awesome songs, which don't have any don't have a studio component. They're purely orchestral Metallica creations with Michael Kamen. I really would have liked. I think if Michael Kamen hadn't passed, they eventually would have done a full album of original music as a collaboration between Michael Kamen and Metallica. That would have been awesome. Ugh. And in an alternate universe, I know that exists, and I would love to see it. But Michael Kamen passed, unfortunately. So maybe they'll do that with another conductor one day. That would be so awesome. Like purely original orchestral Metallica songs. That would be great. But and there's an S&M 2. They redid S&M again, and that one I don't have. I recently learned about it. It's like, oh, I gotta get that. But it's a lot of stuff that they did the first time around. I don't know if they did it. They did new songs from Hardwired to Self Destruct. So I want to get it just for that, just to hear which songs they chose and who the conductor is, because I don't know what conductor they worked with for that. So I'm pretty sure No Metallica is somebody great, and it's going to be great stuff. But I'll get around to that. But that's my Metallica. The overall Metallica post. I just wanted to do that because I love the band. I'll do some other musicians, because I'm a huge admirer of a lot of artists, musical artists out there, and I just like showing my appreciation for what they've given me so much. They've given me such pleasure. So that's it. I'll maybe do some different videos about each individual album. I don't know. We'll see. If you want me to, let me know. I'll break down like my favorite songs from each album or something like that. But just a general breakdown of me and my Metallica journey. Like, subscribe, all that good jazz. I appreciate your time. Hope you're having a good time out there. Stay safe. And that's it. I'll see you next time in the Dragon's Den. Young old man out. Agone. Peace.